let's begin. So yes, of course, I am a Georgia born and raised Stone Mountain kid, but my parents are by way of Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, and Dayton, Ohio, and then North Carolina, and that's in Moxville, which is right outside of Winston-Salem. And they came down here. I want to say exploring a different taste of life, just something that they felt like was to set their independence in life.
Right.
Just growing up from the families they came from, and so that led them to meeting here. And when two tango, one thing leads to another. And I was actually born on my father's birthday, so that's like been the story of my life is the fact that I was born on my father's birthday, and we did the math a little bit, and it might be a little bit TMI, but if you roll back 9 months, it was my mother's birthday, and so
Nice.
the irony in the story is the conception was on one birthday, and then the birth was on another, and so that's kind of like been the story of my life, but also a gift and a curse because it left me with a sense of belonging, but also a sense of in-depth search for my own identity.
Okay.
And I think that leads a lot to just my creativity as a whole. Is just that consistent search of who I am and exploring who that is as a person, especially with the significance in my birth to my parents alone. And so just wanting to know what my value is that I'm supposed to bring to the world. And honestly, I think I knew that at an early age. Like I chose, we were raised, Southern Baptist, so I chose to be baptized myself. I think at like 5 or 6, and it wasn't something that I did because I was, following a lead of anybody. It was literally something I knew I wanted to experience something for myself, and that was like one of the first times I began to independently choose my own experience.
Right.
Um, which I feel like growing up that did lead to a bit of mischievness. I definitely became a bit rebellious with that thought, especially being a boy in a family full of women on my mom's side. So it was something that led me into mischievousness, but I think it also put me in a position to be exposed to more opportunity because I needed redirection from that.
Right.
And that's definitely where creativity came into play. I did things like taekwondo. I did gymnastics in my youth. Just a lot of recreational things to kind of pull me into a better energetic vibe.
Right.
And of course, by way of all of that, I ended up doing music. I think around fourth grade is the first time I touched drumsticks after school in a after school program they had,
Okay.
and I fell in love. I knew from there that this was my all out like just expression of life, doing music. And I think that was the moment I played for a drum show and I had to learn what was it, the Beatles. I had to learn one of the songs from the Beatles album. And as I played on the drums, I just remember the full interaction of watching people watch me, and the whole experience of learning this music, playing it for them, and the expression that was happening with all of us. It was such a moment that I think it just really stuck with me, and I want to learn every way this works. And so, honestly, a lot of my youth growing up was tailored to that same path. Just me finding myself as a musician, and although we come from a family of academia and definitely education is important, I always knew I wanted to pursue my education through music somehow, like being in marching band and doing that all the way up until my junior year of high school. And junior year, I just said, hey, I want to learn more about the business of this. I really want to understand how to make this a livelihood because a lot of people tell me I need to find a career. Music isn't going to take care of everything. You can't just, the speculations that come
Oh
with
yeah. Oh yeah, for
being
sure.
an artist. But I definitely feel like my band director took an interest in me personally, and that's what shifted my future. Is Mr. McKinley, shout out Mr. Jimmy McKinley. put me in a senior recreational class that was
Okay.
music production, and I was a junior, so I wasn't supposed to take it. But he was like, "Look, man, I see you're eager. We're gonna put you on this project while we're in here." And what I ended up doing was creating our first musical, being one of the executive producers on our first musical that we had ever done at that school with pre-recorded show music. And it was really cool because I wrote the songs and actually had some of the artists lip sync it. So it was my first time doing really behind the scenes work and understanding how music industry things were, transpiring. Like the fact that I was writing music, but understanding somebody else is going to portray this character that you're writing. So it,
Right.
it taught me how to be a songwriter, strengthen my production value, learning like, okay, you're gonna have to remind yourself that this is playing in an auditorium, so it has to be mixed and mastered properly. Just all of these detailed nature things of the business. And I ended up going to vocational school after I left that to kind of like in between to college.
Okay.
Um, and that was what I did with my senior year. But right before I left, I just remember him telling me, you know, beware of the belly of the beast. And it was just his message to me about getting into the music industry, man.
Right, and that's one of the questions that I definitely had for you. Like in as far as your influences and everything else, like I listen to your music, and I'm sure I get a completely different. I'm old, so I get a completely different vibe and everything like that. Like, but there's a tremendous amount of passion that you can hear. Like it's almost palpable when you turn from the first note. Everything it seems very, and you can feel free to insert and correct me. It seems very purpose filled. Like there's not a note, not for nothing, but for me listening as a consumer, right? Like there's not, it doesn't, everything seems on purpose from the beginning bass drop to the chimes in the background in the middle of the bridge. Like everything seems just orchestrated. And can you speak to kind of where that originates?
Yes, for sure. I honestly, I think it just comes from being classically trained as a musician, but also watching other mediums. So like not just looking at musicians, but looking at like and may get ridiculed for this, but I honestly look at people like Walt Disney, even Martin Luther King, and his speech and how detailed his speech was. Walt Disney and how he based a whole universe on his last name, or people like Steve Jobs, or even Ryan Leslie, who is he's not just a musician, but he's a Harvard grad who invented the smartphone and is Forbes, 500 top. I forgot the list, but I look at people who do innovative things in other mediums, and I think that's what makes me want to detail every purpose of the music I use because a lot of people don't know these frequencies aren't for they're not for nothing. There's definitely energy that passes through each expression that we infuse with this. And so I always wanted to be aware. And ironically, self awareness is a big topic in the camp that I'm in now, which I'll kind of bridge the gap to how I got to that. So when I graduated high school, went to college, went to Georgia State, and while I was there, I picked up on EDM music, which
Okay.
that really is where I was able to understand how to orchestrate the feeling and the vibration of music because that's what it's all about. When you're making music with no words, it teaches you how to orchestrate.
And
So
I in the when I'm in Vegas in the summer, they have the EDM festival down there. You see people just like when I say they get down, like I'm like okay, and I went to one of the shows, not necessarily for me. A lot of going on and everything like that. But I just get excited about people getting excited, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like,
sure,
obviously there's something to it. Let me go check it out. Before I say, you know what I'm saying? Before I say it's not for me, let me go check it out, see what they're doing. Because obviously with whether it's the light, they had light shows and everything like that going on, and the music was really deep, and it would like these tremendous bass drops, and it was a lot. But if I genuinely get your point, like it everybody there was having a good time. Like the music kind of took the motion into a category all its own. So no,
oh
I
yeah,
definitely think that's dope.
And so that was really where a lot of the intuitiveness on that aspect came from. But the more that I ventured into EDM, the more, what's the word? The more processed I kind of began to feel,
Right.
because it's a very commercial environment. Very, like, these are the people that are making car commercials. They're focused on going and finding the next pop stars. Like, a lot of these EDM DJs and producers are also your pop star producers. They're behind your biggest pop star acts. And so with coming with that type of status, it's just a lot of process work. And I'm a very organic person. And so although it was a fun genre, and it was a genre that I think got my production name out there the farthest, I still had to come home to hip hop, man. And
I
so
feel you.
when I was 19, I kind of came out of that community. And ironically, I ended up running into this man by the name DJ Rosaru at a Vans opening at one of the malls here in Georgia. And he invited us to his house. It was me and my other friends that I DJ'd with. And he was like, yo, you guys DJ? Come to my house. So let's see what you got. You know what I mean? And we were so impressed by how he DJ'd there. Like, we ended up going to his house. And as we're pulling up, we were like, we should probably Google this guy. So we're Googling this guy. And we lose our minds because as we're sitting in the driveway, we realize this was the tour DJ and manager for Tribe Called Quest.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay.
And when I walk in, dude, it's like a normal three rise kind of townhouse, beautiful. And there's this like little Toto looking black dog that comes and greets us. His name is Carl. He's really dope. And there's these plaques on the wall, and it's the graduation plaque, and it's got his name on it, and it says "Flashing Light" for Kanye's graduation. And then next to it is the plaques for like Tribe Called Quest albums that he's worked on. And at that moment, that was the first notable person that I met that was like a legend to me. Like, they
Right.
shaped my future. I listened to this music and it created my sound. It created my lyricism. It taught me poetry and rhythm. You know what I mean? It was like I connected immediately with the moment and understanding how valuable it was. And so that was me at 19. And he's honestly spent the past all the way up to me being 26, about to turn 27, mentoring me, man, and showing me the true art of all of this, the true
Right.
art of music business, hip hop, the soul, the five elements, um, like you name it, dude. Like, there's been so much vast wisdom and knowledge that I've gained through this experience that the only way I'll be able to sum it up is dropping gems in music, as hip hop is supposed to do. But it's something that when I connected with him and I started building towards finding my sound, finding my persona, finding my path, finding my navigation, you start to kind of understand the ins and outs and how to truly listen to what my band director said, which was be careful and be aware of the belly of the beast. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of room for people to be exploited in this industry.
Right,
But
and that's one of the things you hear. I mean, I've obviously never been a part of the music industry at all, but as an onlooker, the number one thing that you see like Puffy and all these other moguls, but they glommed onto the talent and then pushed their way and kind of to your point, they exploited them and they gave them cars and oh, you want a car, you want a house, you want a whatever. It's kind of like Cadillac Records, right? Like I'm going to give
yeah,
you the thing you want in exchange for basically your essence.
yeah. And really, what it is they build an entity, and they build this momentum around this entity, and then they give you a 360 deal, which means that they own, your masters, the rights to your entity. The Imagine me and you love books, and then one day I decide to get a bunch of books and put them on this cart and push it around and give it to people to read, and people actually buy the books. Then you say, "Hey, man, that's a really good idea. You know, you should come do that for me." We call it Barnes and Nobles, but here's the thing: I own everything because I told you to do it, and because I have all these people that want more books than you're able to give out, and then they just create this
Yep.
machine, and then at the end of the day, if you're unsatisfied with your terms of agreement, if you didn't invest anything, they own it. And so I
Yeah.
think that the biggest thing that we did not have before, which is really gaining and growing with a lot of the festival life that came from EDM, is the
Hmm.
educational side. Like they do a lot of conventions along with the festivals now, where they educate artists on how they go about dealings. Because honestly, it's corporate America's job to do what they do. It's your job to know how to deal. You know what I
Right.
mean? And there's a lot of my friends personally that I've seen transpire and create beneficial deals for themselves that aren't trapping, aren't 360, aren't exploiting, and they actually get the exposure that we're all promised. They actually receive it, and they're able to build bridges and give back, and that's what it's all about. So I feel like just learning under Tribe Called Quest and Ross Root and a teaching like that was something that definitely geared me in the right way, saved my life. I definitely have hit some bumps in the road. I've signed some pretty crappy contracts here or there, but learning from them and knowing that they weren't as severe, that I always, number one, have had my master's and I've always been in control of my entity. Learning that early on is something that was so beneficial. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm also grateful to the point that when I finally started to figure out how to walk in this industry of myself and how to kind of open my own doors,
Right.
he really started to feed into that. And we actually, over the past 3 years, have been working on my debut album. And so that's
Nice.
something that
Nice.
this next coming year we're looking to roll that out, man. So
And I really want to, and for the younger, right? Like I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that even in our culture in and of itself, right? Like you're habitually taught either you're really good at athleticism or you're creative or whatever. At what point, what advice would you give aside from for those that don't necessarily have a mentor like one of the ones that you were blessed to come in contact with to kind of lead them away from those trappings, because at the end of the day, if somebody shows up and you've lived in lack, right? Like in our community, a lot of these kids grow up in lack, so they don't have. So when someone, their dream is to have, once they get an opportunity to have, right, like you end up making a deal with the devil because you want your dream to come to fruition so desperately, right? Like you're like you're sick of eating ramen noodles, you know what I mean? Like you're seeing these guys on TV and so forth, and their music is balls, it sucks. Like they're and you're listening to your own stuff, you're like, ooh, if I could just get out there, if they could just hear what I have to say. And then corporate America shows up, gives you a check that says, hey, this is your dream is to be successful, here it is, but you don't get to own it, it's mine, you're giving it to me. Like what advice would you give to these younger cats coming up, and hell, even some that are in the industry right now getting chewed up by this machine? The more ideas you come up with, the more they take. Like what advice would you give for these young brothers coming up?
first and foremost, read, read, READ. Read your contract. Read between the lines. Read the room. Read. Reading is fundamental, dude. Like I used to get made fun of because I had we used to have these things called AR points. If you read books with large pages, you would get these points and go to a book fair and get prizes. I used to
Right.
read Harry Potter books for fun just to win it because I love reading, man. Read, dude. I sit and read articles all the time. Like I know back in the day, you have the old man with the coffee reading newspapers. I'm that now, but I read articles all the time. I have my timeline set to show me articles based on the field I'm interested in to keep me on a positive and progressive path. I don't look at, I really monitor the intake of what I do here on these digital platforms, but just knowing how to read for yourself, knowing how to understand and comprehend what you're getting into. And like I said earlier, knowing your terms of agreement.
Right.
Think about how many times we get an update on our phone and just hit accept on the terms of agreement, never read it. Simple
Yeah,
things like
even when you're signing something, I always click the thing because a buddy of mine, like maybe it was maybe 10 years ago, he's like, they could have put the cure for cancer in the terms and agreement, and nobody ever reads it. So how would you ever know? You just click the button so you can get on to the next thing.
exactly. So I feel like just learning to slow down our instant gratification and taking the time and patience that it takes to read read life. Because like I said, it's more than just using your eyes. For me, reading is a full um, sensual body experience in the sense that I'm using all of my senses to
Right,
experience this moment. That's true reading. So that's when you can feel something, you know if it's right or wrong, you know if it's for you or not. And don't get me wrong, there are some people that are like, I just want to think. And if you give them anything other than a 360 deal, they're going to fail because they just want their purpose. And that's
yep,
okay. That's perfectly fine. But knowing who you are will tell you what's for you. And the second thing I want to say is getting into this industry, you got to understand there's a duality, there's a balance to everything. And there's a big difference between the persona and the personal life. There's a
right.
life of your persona, but there's also a life of your personal. And knowing how to balance and separate the two will take you so far. A lot of people cross that blurred line very so often because they don't have the business and personal separated. And knowing that, yeah, it's still personal, but it's a persona, and
Right.
that's what makes it personal.
I thought,
Okay.
wow, that's tremendous. The other side of the deal, right, and even the depth in which you conduct yourself. I Obviously there are pieces of that are transferable, but how do you, like, you have to be extremely disciplined, like you genuinely do, like, and even for me in my personal life, I'm not musically inclined whatsoever. My son will tell you that. The idea is you can never give me something I don't want,
Hmm.
free or otherwise. You can never, I don't care who you are or what you do. I've always been kind of made that way. You can't give me free food if I'm not hungry. I'm not that person. Like, I don't just take it because it's consumable. But you are very much in that ilk where, like, is it a learned action? Is it something that you can point to? Is it, obviously it's habit, right? Like, people think you're born with character. You're not. You build it. So the more you are set in action, like doing the wrong thing a bunch and get you doing the wrong thing, doing the right thing a whole lot. All those actions get built on top of each other, and that's how you become great. But for you, I would like to know, like, success leaves clues. What were some of yours?
Man, one of the biggest clues I think um, I finally had a realization on was understanding that it's truly an everyday walk. And you're responsible for every waking moment that you have, but you're also given a reset. Everybody has a moment of rest. So I always think of it as every time that I rest or I go to sleep, I'm not aware of when that happens. I just, transcend into sleep. But every time that I'm awake, that's ground zero. That's daybreak. That's the new chance to begin learning. And a lot of people wake up knowing everything. I don't understand how you can do that. It's a whole new day. You've never been in it before, but you already know the day. And
Yeah.
I had to unlearn that programming and say, my first thing to do is learn. You know what I mean? Like, for all I know, in my sleep, I'm forgetting how to be human. So I have to wake up and be human. Like, you think about it, you wake up, open your eyes, brush your teeth. You just go through these human instincts every day. And I think, honestly, and also just to tap in, I'm a very spiritual person. I wouldn't say I'm religious. Of course, everybody has an upbringing of certain beliefs if they, are exposed to it. But I'm a very spiritual person. I've been very fortunate to read a lot of texts, read a lot of studies, especially with my father just being somebody who's very philosophical. I've been able to understand the world through so many perceptive views. He's had friends who were Hindu, Krishna, Muslim, just you name it. And everybody always gives me this same beacon of love at the end of the day, no matter who I talk to. And it's something that resonated with my spirit so much that, that's what I tapped into is my spirituality, my spirit man, and understanding everybody's coexistence and their experience in battles with their saying. And so reasoning with that, honestly, I think is the biggest thing that kept me grounded is understanding that there's purpose beyond. Gotta let go of my ego, and doing something as simple as this. I could be um, in my own universe, not to anybody else, but in my own universe, I could be a god on earth, but still be insignificant enough to be a speck on the third rock from the sun. That's really just a water planet. And it's
Right.
something that hits me in that perspective of balance. Like I told you, the persona versus the personal. I
Right.
start to just look at everything left foot, right foot, just duality of life, simplify it as much as I can. And that's what disciplines me, is understanding simplification is key. If you can uh, say no to something 1,000 times, you can say no to something once. You know what I mean? And you don't have to think about the other 1,000 times. One of the things that I also think is fortunate enough is I have had access to therapy. A lot of people, um, have their thoughts about it, but I actually went in and took a dive for myself. And I advise everybody get a therapist, talk to
Yes.
somebody, talk to somebody because we're all, especially with this pandemic going on, we just experienced world trauma, but we're all experiencing trauma. And especially being a black man in America, one of the most traumatic experiences just to wake up every day. So I definitely say seek counsel, seek therapy, seek guidance, think something outside of yourself because only ego is going to be the combat to that discipline issue. You know what I mean? That's something that I definitely feel like helps me and was my key was just trying some of the things that we shy away from anyway. They tell us to do these things. When your parents tell you to do something that they've already learned through, just learn to listen more. Learn to listen more, man.
Well, and that goes back to your point before the it was for the reading, but reading is actually fundamental. But I feel like one of the things that you're saying is your level of discipline has been as purpose filled as your music. Like you pour all those things are all linear in the same column for you, that it's one step at a time for everything. There's nothing comes before the other until it gets there. Like that doesn't happen a lot. Like I don't know if you recognize how unique that is. That at an early age, being, and I don't mean right, like you're getting ready to be 27 here in a week or some change. The understanding that's like wisdom of a 50, 60 year old person that's lived and been in the world. Like it seems like old hat for you. It appears to anyway. Like you've been on this journey from when you found your first love, right? The your drums
Mm.
and everything like this in the fourth grade. Like it seems as though all those things kind of have been just moving the planets into one single alignment for you. Uh, can has it been that for you? Like it as a right? Like I'm a listener as well as a host for this deal, but I'm genuinely interested.
It's definitely something that the more in tune I became with my past, the more aligned I felt.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of times people say that nothing happens by coincidence, but I believe coincidence is, I mean, because why? Because I feel like coincidence is the basis to life because you literally coincide with these experiences.
Right.
And in order to do that, I feel like we have to be very accepting. We can't go into things with expectation. And so the minute that I let go of expectation, all that anxiety, all that fear, all those negative things bogging us down just kind of dissipates. And I have that feeling of freedom and that feeling of acceptance. I'm open to listen, learn, and just be honest and willing with everything that's within my destiny. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times when we feel out of place, ironically, it's we're too much in the excitement of life. We're putting we're putting the cart before the horse,
Right.
and we're not allowing the time for the true nature to evolve with ourselves. Where I read this book by Nipsey Hussle called Power versus Force, and understanding that power is exuded, not forced. And once it becomes forced, that's when you're breaking the barrier and pushing that blurred line. And so I definitely feel like I've learned my power, and that I don't have to force energy. What's for me will attract.
That's dope. I want to transition. I know you are, and all of these things actually make more sense the more that I get to hear and listen to kind of the path that you've been walking. Uh, Kind of speak to your level of activism. I see you on Instagram and posting and on social media platforms and the like whether it's uh Breonna Taylor, say her name, the George Floyd, like these unarmed black people of color, uh, basically getting their lives taken for sport at this point. What are some of your positions? Obviously, you are the demographic. You are the young black male that looks the part. Is that right? Like as they say, like you look the part. So how I know how I feel. Again, I'm old. What you know what I mean? Like I've been in the world. I all these things, but how does it feel for you? Because I'm to speak to anxiety, traumas, even the going to the grocery store for me is purposeful. Like I make sure that I look like I'm in this community. I make sure I look as the right, like I make people feel comfortable before they get an opportunity to speak to me, because the definition or the description that is often given, if someone who doesn't know me, well, who is he? It's the big bald black guy. Like that is usually the the descriptors, not necessarily my education nor my upbringing nor my contribution to the community. So kind of speak to your position and how you felt
My
about that.
own. The
So I feel like one of the things that I really have to speak to first is I wasn't fully aware growing up, just because there were a lot of what's the movie? There was a movie. Oh, like there was a lot of the hidden colors that they talk about
Right.
that I wasn't aware of, just being in a position where my parents were kind of like pushing myself to be more privileged, or pushing myself to be more in an environment that
You could say what was better than what they grew up around.
Right.
And so I think that put me in a place and in a position to where I wasn't always aware, honestly. And it wasn't until I grew up and became, more of a black man, like grew my facial features, actually like kind of grew into myself, that it struck. As a youth, I was treated, kind of like with the diverse crowd. Um, I thought everything was about love, man. I really did growing up.
It is.
And
Don't let the smooth taste fool you. It is.
and I still hold on to that. I still hold on to that. But I think the first time, and also I was in a private school, so there was a lot of shielding. I think the first time I became aware of everything was when I went to public school, and I was being singled out for being creative. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was always getting kicked out of class for speaking my mind, why I, you know, was getting singled out just for having a different intellect than my peers that were in the same race as me. And then they put you in a new class where you're also now like, isolated, because at this time it run a lot of black kids in the advanced program. So it was just like those moments is what showed me kind of that identity. And when I got exposed to that, that's when it hit home. I think I was out and about at a mall, and one of my friends, who was a little bit darker complexion than me, was being questioned. But they talked to me as if there was no issue because they couldn't quite, figure my race out. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling. Number one, I felt so displaced because I now understood what it was like to be in a position where, and I also did an ancestry test where I found out there is a very large European and African descendants in my bloodline. So like I actually am a truly mixed child. And I never understood why that difference stood out until a lot of things started making sense like that situation. And what I ended up learning was both sides of the coin in the sense of, okay, this is privilege, but this is oppression. And there needs to be a conversation. You know what I mean? Like this
Right.
isn't even about there needs to be a superiority over inferiority. There needs to be a conversation because there's a lack of understanding on both sides. And the lack of understanding on being an oppressed person is uneducation. The lack of understanding on being somebody of a supremacist point of view is ignorance. And once I kind of felt that point, I realized I've got to do something other than just sit and observe this conversation like a tennis match. And I think that's what made me want to be active was I wanted a voice to be heard that spoke on the conversation and actually having it and not just stirring anger or doing emotional manipulation. Like a lot of the protests that I did here in Atlanta, I wasn't doing, out of rioting reason. It was really something that I wanted to go out and talk to people and understand their point of view and let them know they have a voice and like, hey, I'm here just to listen to you. Like I know everybody's protesting and saying one unified thing, but I also want to talk to you. I interviewed a lot of people. I just would sit and talk with people and understand like where do you come from in this point of view. And I think as a whole, that's something that we can put into action is actually taking the time to have the conversation, actually taking the time to listen, read, understand, communicate. You know what I mean? Just
The fundamentals.
the fundamentals. And I also feel like that's something that goes into the character of self awareness.
Right.
And once you are self aware, that's when the journey truly begins. You know what I mean?
Well, let me ask you this because I'm gonna take the affirmative here. You said the self awareness. What I found to be true for the most part is like the Men in Black, right? Like, if a person is highly intelligent, people are stupid. You can get five. Let's take five. You can get five people together, and you cannot have them agree on one thing. The reason for it is they don't know themselves first, which speaks to your fundamentals. Like if you're not reading, if you don't understand your own culture and where you come from, you make rash decisions predicated on what you've already been told and not what you actually know to be fact.
Very true. Very true. And I think that's something that causes, like I said, imagine having that conversation and somebody puts the cart before the horse in combo. Then when you want to correct them, their first pride option is no, I gave the right information, maybe in the wrong order, but that's on you. And
Right.
now they're putting the misunderstanding on you know what I mean? There's so many conversations that happen like that. And it's just out of that ego battle, man. And again, I feel like ego is just the overcompensation for the lack of self awareness. And that's a deep dive. I understand it's not something that is easy to do. Much simpler to just look at things on a surface level. But I still feel like you'll find a greater good on the other side of that deep dive. Like people truly tapping into themselves and understanding what they don't like, do like, listening, learning, growing every day. You'll be a better person for it. And what you'll truly find is you don't have to walk into your identification closet and feel like it's Baskin Robbins where you got to pick 31 flavors for the day and figure out which one you're narrowing down to. You can legit just walk into a Neapolitan shop and, okay, you know, chocolate, strawberry, and choosing vanilla for the day. Or I'm just saying no to vanilla, strawberry, and choosing chocolate for the day. It's narrowing down our decision making to truly identify our targeted audience is what we call it in marketing. But honestly just knowing who you are and knowing the community you can speak on. Because a lot of people say that they're here for everyone, but there's so many different languages. You got to know what language you speak first. You know what I
That
mean?
yes, the a toddler believes in always and never. Those two things do not exist. There's no such thing as always, and there's no such thing as never. You have to actively, to your earlier point, you're making choices predicated on what's happening right now. So if you, instead of saying no 1,000 times, you have to actively choose to say no the one time, then again. Like you're now making a completely different decision every single time.
For sure. And so I feel like, honestly, taking those moments of just awareness and reflection and saying, all right, was I the best of me I could be today? You know what I mean? Was I able to see those growth points? I know somebody may have mentioned in past I'm confrontational in conversation. Did I take the time to consider the other opposition point of view today? Did I practice just small things, man, small things could really help tailor that and help you build that identity that you're looking for. And some people, I think that them understanding their aggression is just not knowing their identity of expression. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, you take somebody like Floyd Mayweather. If he didn't have boxing, imagine how he would have been expressing himself with all that aggression. But the fact that somebody like Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather found those mediums, we could have, like, and I say it ironically, but seriously too, we could have prevented serial killers. We could have, you never know what proper channel of expression could prevent. And I think that just goes back to all of us taking the time to consider each one's identity, taking the time to understand each spiritual experience we're all having while coexisting here. There is no one-sided point of view. I think that that's my beauty in music, my beauty in rhythm, rhyme, and my beauty in reason is just understanding that we have to each one teach one and take that time to consider life and be self-aware and truly be aware of that surrounding as well.
I think it's obviously that's very thoughtful. The the concern, I won't say fear because that's not real. The concern that I have is moving forward. Like it's very difficult to sit down and have a conversation about things that you may not necessarily want fixed.
Hmm.
So there's already a built-in you have trap doors built in the system already, because I know I don't want you to get to the end, but you don't know that I don't want you to get to the end. So it appears as though I'm assisting you, but I'm only assisting you to the level in which you're comfortable no longer needing my assistance.
Right. I mean, and honestly, one of the things that I do see into that is number one, remember when I said listen and read? Also
Hmm.
understanding on the other side, teaching a man to fish. How do you truly teach a man to fish? If you keep giving him fish and he's coming back at your door asking where the fish is, it's on you. You have to truly know how to teach a man to fish. And that's part of the identification process.
Right.
If he's constantly having to borrow your fishing pole, of course you're gonna get mad when one day you're like, hey, that's mine. Why don't you get your own? Did you teach him where that's at? You know what I mean? Did you teach him there's so much that goes into it that I think this is a never ending thing. Like learning is an everyday. Learning is an everyday, and you're never gonna know it all. So I think people being in the accepting point to say, you know what, I will have to be taught how to teach every day is
I like that.
the
I
only
like
way
that.
that conversation begins. Think about how many times your kids have taught you how to teach them.
Yes, more way too many times, right? Like, but and also, I think what assists them in helping me, right? Like this is a mutual vibration, right? Like, so what helps me is understanding that I don't know. Like I lead with I don't know, so I'm not telling them, we're learning from each other. Like I obviously have the experience in one way, shape, or form, but they have the eagerness to learn. if I show up with the same eagerness to learn how to communicate with them. Like I've got 3 kids, so they communicate and I communicate with them on 3 separate and different frequencies. It's hardly ever, if ever, the same way. My daughter is very sensitive, and I'm a lot like that. Like deep down in my core, I'm a very sensitive person, so I have to tap into that in order to act, even when if she's gone awry or messed up or whatever. Like I have to tap into that first before I get on there and start chewing ass and going whatever. Like it has to begin with me. But that's a conscious decision again every time. Every single time it's a conscious decision. I want to learn from I want to learn how you need to be spoken to, how I need to interact with you, so I know and what's comfortable for you. And that's ever evolving. That's always going to be something different because you're in a different mood. To your point, you wake up and you may have forgotten how to be a human in your rested state. So what is it that today, instead, well, yesterday it worked, well, today it may not work, and we may have to learn some new way to communicate. But the fact that I lead with love, another point, I lead with love, it makes it a labor of love because it's absolutely difficult and it's energy draining and everything else, but it matters to me. So like everything else, like those fundamentals that you spoke to, like this, yeah, man, this is deep and it's hard. Like
Man, but it's definitely something that I think taking that deep dive in the reflection pool, it'll hit you there, and it's something that I and believe it or not, you are one of the people to attest to this. Um, I've watched a lot of the men in my past find themselves in this slice of life, and everybody that has seen a point of success, I know they've reached it because they start to get back. And I start to talk to them and I'm like, what is it? What did you find? What is it? You know what I mean? And it's always this description of it. Can't explain it, can't tell you about it, can't share it, but I can love it with you. And
yes,
we all learn to love it. And it's this I don't know, this zen, this point. Like my mentor says, the peak of the mountaintop. And I think I was born with that intuition, and I'm just happy to be on my path. I do feel like I feel the presence of so many walks of life and experiences just in my own, but I'm also in no rush. You know what I mean? I'm enjoying every moment of every second of every day because I'm learning from it. And that's something that right before I was going to college, this girl told me, she was like, remember every second of your waking moment and your sleeping moment, but every second of your conscious aware waking moment, you must learn. Like 3 seconds ago, I just learned how to describe something better than I know now in this conversation with you. Just simple things like that. Every moment you must learn. There is never a chance to not. And when you stop learning, you start dying.
I'm starting to get with you on that, like just in general, because you feel like you forget, like you've resigned yourself to your fate. Like once you stop growing, whether it's sampling other people's experiences, whether it's dealing with how you deal with your own personal relationships and how those flow. Like if you already know you can't fill up a full cup.
It's what's the point? That's what you'll start to, tell yourself. And a lot of people fall into this brainwashed insanity of, and that's why I think the instant gratification is like kind of playing into people's kind of insane state of being right now. But when they feel like they already have a full cup, they're in this room. And the room, I say, feels like a psych ward where you're looking at these 4 walls of grief. Because to tell yourself that you're done here, to tell yourself that you're done here is the most traumatic experience I think we put ourselves through. And, that's really taking too much of the reins into your own life. That's what I feel is that, like, you're playing too big of a role here for you to tell yourself. say you're done here. And this is, somebody coming from suicide, depression, anger, like all of those issues. So it's not that I want to single anything out, but I do want to speak to what has helped me get over those. And so as I'm sitting in this room, I'm going through the grief and the trauma of what I've just told myself. And what are the 5 stages of grief? The first thing you do is you go through denial. After denial, you go through anger. After anger, you go through bargaining. And after bargaining, you go through depression. And if depression doesn't work, instant gratification told you to deny that and then get angry about it and then scam on it. And then where are you back at? But you're going to deny that. And you see how insane that is?
Oh yeah.
Bouncing around 4 walls in a loony bin. People are afraid of acceptance. People fear what they want the most, acceptance. And that's it. I think that's the craziest part to me.
We're standing at the bottom of the ocean right now. That's deep. That's deep. That's deep. That's deep. The thing that you want is the thing that is allowing you to stay in the same place. Wow.
Now,
dude, that's
and the craziest part is there's no true answer to acceptance other than love, and you got to figure that part out for yourself. You got to love yourself, man. You got to look up and notice that there's a roof and ask yourself, can I fly out of these 4 walls? Because that's acceptance. That's the final stage. And that part, I've only gained through exposure and experience and sharing and communication. So honestly, I say we just got to keep going. There's nothing else we can do but keep going, because there has to be a light at the end of it. There is no other option. For us to even have the thought of being in this place, we had to come from somewhere to get here. And I always remember hearing this saying, I don't know who started it, but I know Steve Harvey kind of made it popular. If you're going through hell, why would you stop? You know what I mean? Don't stop while you're going through hell.
Keep going.
Keep going. So I say all that to say, you asked me what advice would I have. I say all that to say, I'm going to say the same thing everybody else has told you guys out there. Keep going. Keep going, man. Don't stop.
I love it.
Don't stop. Keep going. That's how you make it.
I love it, dude. I'm gonna wrap this up. I know you got things to do. I genuinely appreciate your time. One thing it would bother me if I didn't tell you on wax in front of God and everybody is initially when you were born, because I was there, I wanted to be what Algin is to me for you. Now in that space, I didn't recognize to that self-reflection part. I never recognized that I had so many traumas that I never settled. I've settled them now. But now I'm 40. So go figure that. It is imperative to me that you understand that I absolutely love you as a human. And I recognize that although my shortcomings in the times where I felt like you needed me most, I needed to make sure that I was whole so I could be there when you did need me most. So I like I said, I would be remiss. I very much feel as though I owe you an apology, but vis-a-vis our conversation just here, I feel like you understand and you hear what I'm saying. So,
man, when I tell you, you being in my life is why I'm in my nephew. Oh, my little sister has a child. Now, I'm pretty sure you're caught up. But if you're not,
I am very much caught up.
I am to him as you were to me, and I learned from you. And one of the biggest things was I feel like a lot of people resented you going to find yourself. I applauded it. I followed it. I got ridiculed for it, but I'm glad because that's that journey, man. That's that journey. Nothing like self journey, man.
And that's a part of it too. Like and especially to that very point, I am whole or getting to that point, right? Like even on here, like having conversations that may make other people uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with them. I recognize there's no revisionist history. I own every piece of my history that I have taken part in, no sweat. But that was a part of it, that healing, that understanding that hurt people, and sometimes it is that way. But that's to that journey, and that's to the fundamentals of it. So,
Man, well, I am much appreciated just for this conversation alone. Just if you knew this conversation is one of the biggest gratifying things I have and the biggest give backs that I feel like I could take away. Because this is the confirmation for me. This is confirmation that what you left me with, I'm not crazy. And you know, it was right, number one, and you did leave something behind. And you left great, amazing tools to find this path. So thank you. You have a lot to do with me being here, man. You have a lot to do with this mentality. So thank you.
I I think you give me too much credit, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you very much. I really can't wait for. Go ahead, hit it.
I was gonna tell you one thing that I had to learn about this music industry. A legend will always precede you. You may not be there, but your legend is. So thank you for that.
That's so dope. That's so dope, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I cannot wait for you. Said the new project. Are we looking at the next 6 months? Are we looking at right after your birthday? What are we looking at?
So I will tell you something, and this is an exclusive. My project will release after my team releases the first project that they've turned in, and that's Five Dogs album. As soon as we get Five Dogs postpartum album wrapped up and get that going, we'll talk about rollouts for Bcuz's debut. I'll go ahead and tell you the name of it though. The name of my debut album is called Self Aware, and it's a story of a day in the life of me, leading all the way up into a conversation with a special person in our family. And that part, I want people to go ahead and get on the ride, man, and they'll enjoy the
That'll be
journey, man.
that'll be dope. That'll be dope. Well, like I said, I appreciate you, brother. I love you. This has been another episode of From the Root to the Fruit. I'm Jay Smith. That's Zarius Hampton. You guys be good to
Because
each other. Please like and subscribe. Helps the channel a ton. Take care of each other because everybody needs it. Peace.
peace.